Now, looking at what has dominated public discourse in the past couple of months, one gets the idea that Kenyans have their priorities wrong. The latest official statistics show that the cost of living rose steeply during the period, yet politics and fringe concerns such as the many tender wars of big government projects are the main focus. Inflation has nearly doubled from about 5.2% in September last year to 9.04%, a 4-year high that has certainly brought pain upon millions in the low-income bracket. Basically, inflation is being driven by higher cost of food in the wake of a prolonged drought and transport costs arising from the general recovery of petroleum prices in recent months. An inflation figure is not just a number. It amounts to a real hit on people's wallets, affecting their social, economic welfare and therefore deserving more serious attention than it has received. The statistics actually show that an increase in price of basic food items were the main drivers of inflation in February. And already we have our panelists here in the studio to take us through the state of economy. Right, we'll be delving deeper, looking at what is happening with inflation. Did this really catch the Central Bank of Kenya by surprise? We saw earlier that given a very optimistic projection of the growth of the economy by 5.9%, but that is not really happening. So we'll see what really happened. And allow me to introduce our panelists who are already here in the studio with us. We have with us Dr. Mbiu Wagacha, who is a former acting chairman of the Central Bank of Kenya, also is a senior economic advisor and executive office of the president. Also, we have with us Mike Eldon. He's a management consultant. Also, he is a chairman of KCA University and a columnist with the Business Daily. Also, we have with us Honorable Nderitu Muriithi, who is a former assistant minister in the Ministry of Industrialization, and also he is an economist. And we do have with us also Mureu. He is the chairman of economic policy at the Kenya Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Good morning, gentlemen. And of course, just also to give you a tender reminder of what we'll be discussing this morning, we're looking at the state of the economy, and we are asking you, do you think the Kenyan economy is headed for a meltdown? Is the Kenyan economy headed for a meltdown? You can hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is a Twitter handle. AM Live also is our profile name on Facebook. Right. So we shall be looking at that much later in the course of the program. Do you think the Kenyan economy is headed for a meltdown? I can hear Honorable Nderitu chuckling here, and he thinks...
Oh, a bit dramatic there.
You can't hear him, Daktari? You can't hear me? Maybe we'll have to move you here so that you can get me clearly. Yeah, we'll have to change that. But why are you chuckling?
Oh, well, I think the meltdown is a bit dramatic. I mean, true, inflation is up this quarter, as was expected, as happens in January, February, because it's a dry spell. Even when it is not a drought condition, January, February, we always have a dry spell, and the prices of food are always higher in quarter one. So, you know, there's nothing really out of the ordinary with the fact that inflation is up in quarter one. That's why I'm chuckling. So meltdown, I think, is
a misnomer.
It's rather dramatic. It's rather dramatic. But yes, inflation is up in quarter one, and that is what was expected. And I think that once we are clear of the dry spell, and all indication is that perhaps, you know, as is typical, by March 15th or thereabouts, you might begin to see the onset of, you know, the heavy rainy season. We'll expect that prices of food prices normalize, as is the case in other years.
All right, but this seems to have caught also the policymakers at CBK by surprise. Isn't that the case?
Well, it's as Muriithi says, you know, the CBK has kept the number, you know, dramatically for a long time.
Yes.
Within the bounds that are given by the law, which is a band of 2.5% between 5 and 7.5%. And there's nothing dramatic about the fact that we have a 9%, 9.2% level, which we have to look look at in terms of a broader cluster of macroeconomic indicators in the economy.
Yes.
I do not expect that to be a major figure to drag the economy. Mm-hmm. There are many other factors working for Kenya at the moment. The other indicators, you could think of GDP prospects. You could think of the exchange rate, which has held well compared to the region, exchange rates in the region. You could think of a major inflow of capital on top of the league. At the moment, Kenya is very well rated, and these are factors. You can think of the building opportunities,
yes,
which are coming up with the placement of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport in the first class of global airports. We have many factors that we can take advantage of, and inflation will probably just behave within the range that we allowed by the law.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Mike Eldon.
Well, I think this question of meltdown depends a little on who you are. If you are among the people referred to in the headline in Business Daily today, Kenya mints $900 new millionaires,
yes,
I don't think you'd be too bothered about the price of food. Mm-hmm. It's a small proportion of your total expenditure among your big SUVs and malt whiskies and so forth. But if you're the many millions of people who are at the bottom of the pyramid, who are directly affected by drought, whether in the cities or in the arid areas, I guess it would be a meltdown for you. Mm-hmm. The question is, how do you deal with those for whom it is a meltdown? And how do we make sure that it is just a seasonal thing out of which we will recover? There was an item on BBC yesterday about the cash handouts that are being organized for those most affected. So clearly we are doing things to mitigate the problem for the poorest, but there are many for whom it is a meltdown at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let's hear from James Mureu.
Yeah, thanks. I think from a businessman's perspective, I think the meltdown is real, and we should not hide under this guise that things will get better. The truth is, and I like what Eldon has said, $900 millionaires created. Is it wealth created, or is it money in their pockets? Is it really, are we generating economic activity to create these 900 millionaires? So for me, I think there is much more than meets the eye when we look at this economy. There are people who are definitely enjoying. They couldn't care less what's happening down here. But the truth is, realistically, on the ground, there are many people who are going through hardships. Businessmen, unpaid debts by national government, by county governments, is really affecting business. So when you talk about the inflation, it's real, and it's not something that is that's going to just be wished away unless these debts are paid. Mm-hmm. The government is also not collecting all the revenue it's supposed to collect because of these unpaid debts. So they're not also able to meet some of their obligations. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think there is definitely a problem. And for a long time, the country and my friend Nderitu always wishes that away. But the truth is, there is a big problem. And I think it's about time we actually address the actual problem. Mm-hmm. Rather than say, it's going to be okay. When will it be okay? And how many people must die before we say it's okay?
Right.
It's a real problem.
Let me step in here in my own defense. Look, we are not here to paint a rosy picture and say, there are no challenges. That is not what we're trying to talk about. But I think that as we look at various questions about this economy, we want to analyze them on the basis of data, on the basis of understood cycles, because I think we would be remiss to not accept that every single year, January, February, and March, in fact, food prices are usually higher than, say, in Q2 or Q3 or Q4. Why? Because that is when we have a dry spell in our weather cycle. I mean, those are the facts. We're not trying to embellish them or anything like that. Now, are there Kenyans who, for whom perhaps the economic benefit of growth, as Mike Eldon is saying, you know, on the top end, you know, 900, whatever, and on the bottom end, what is happening there? But look, right now, over 700,000 households receive direct cash transfers from government because of that exact question. That look, we know the economy. I mean, the way wealth is created or the way things happen, it may not be equal for everybody. And therefore, part of the role of government and the state is to see that every single Kenyan does derive some benefit from the upturn in the Kenyan economy. And that is why over 700,000 households receive monthly cash transfers, so in order to boost their income, in order to ensure that the vulnerable are not falling off.
But is that particular cash transfer, the stipend that is being given, especially to the elderly, how commensurate is it also with the inflation rate? Because if you're giving us 2,000, 1,000 in this current economy, how will it cannot even feed you for a week?
Well, now we can debate, is it enough? Should we do more or shouldn't we do more? And I would agree. I think we should do more. But I think we must give credit where it's due. There is a cash transfer happening. Now, you know, should it be twice as much and thrice as much, 10 times as much?
Right.
Yeah.
James Mureu doesn't seem to agree with.
You know, when that in itself, the 700,000 people receiving cash stipends is in itself a problem. That in itself is a problem. It's an indicator that we do have a real problem. Why should we, in this Kenya, in this time and age, be receiving stipends? So there is something that's not really functionally right, and this is what we need to address as a country. Yes.
Not to hammer on that point too much. I think I would like to repeat that the macroeconomy is looked at. You look at it under numerous indicators. When I was at the central bank,
yes,
we kept the inflation rate within the range of 5 to 7% for a very long time, almost 3 years. And it is not like a big bombshell to have a blip of 9% at the moment. I am confident with the capabilities of the central bank that we will bring that number down to where it is. Coming back to the cash distribution, this is a laudable action by the government of Kenya because it brings it into the fiscal activities into league with international practices, even in industrial countries, where you use cash flows to the public as part of the macroeconomic policy of the government.
Yes.
When the economy is down, you increase spending with people who are thrown out of their jobs. When the economy is up, they don't come back to pick up their checks. And it allows the government to make fiscal policy much more effective. So I'd like to plead with my friend to my left that in fact we are modernizing the economy by doing this sort of thing to bring our economy in line with modern economies.
All right, Mike Eldon.
Well, the cash handout is another stage, isn't it? It's a stage forward, given the problems that do exist. It's better than having the problems and not doing the cash handout.
Yes.
And of course, it is an international trend, even in places like Finland.
Yes.
So
Finland, UK.
I've been doing.
US.
I've had a lot of meetings all over town these last few days. So I've been driving all over the place, from Ngong Road to here to there, and more places you are seeing these rows of high-end cars for sale. This inequality, I think, has got quite out of hand here, accompanied by the ostentatious consumption. The cars we see driving on the road I think that is a big problem in this society, as it is in many societies. Now, in some societies, the inequality is there because of issues of graduated taxation, disproportionate returns to capital, all the things we know. Here, it's more complicated and less beautiful than that.
Yes.
And so I don't know if we're going to be able to tackle this ostentatious inequality.
Yes.
And also this big gap between education opportunities available to the not well-off relative to the elite.
Yes.
And I think we may come back to education this morning, but I think just like in America and Trump promising all these jobs back, it's not as simple as that.
Yes.
It is
No, I would
simple.
like to agree with Muriithi that, in fact, when you see wealth growing, it's not a reason to suppress it.
No.
It is a catalyst
Indeed.
for modernization of the economy. And I've just come from Cape Town when they announced that South Africa now is the most unequal economy in the world. It's overtaken Brazil. And the point is, to agree again with Muriithi, is that our task is to transform the economy, bring as many people as possible into the center of economic activity, bring as many employees as possible to make them part of the inclusiveness in wealth creation,
Right.
and to create as many millionaires as possible, and make everybody a partner in the effort to become a millionaire if you can. So that's the way wealth is created. You know, you don't put out the incentives. What you do is you build a nation of ambitious people who are willing to risk and to invest and to save to become millionaires. And that's the way the nation, and by the way, the Kenya at the moment, in many senses of the labor force dynamics and demographics, is at an inflection point. If we make the right decisions regarding the elephant in the room, which is employment, if we make the right decisions to transform the economy, include people in the economy, take the right macro policies to get people involved, we will get there.
All right, James Mureu. Let's hear from James first.
Yeah.
We'll
Okay.
come to you.
James.
You know, I'm listening to this gentleman. I'm wondering, okay, 700,000 people receiving stipends.
Yes.
And that is a good indicator. But how much better would it be if the government paid its debt to the business community so that people actually continue generating wealth? How long is this 700,000 people sustainable? How much can the government, how big will this number get as people get used to handouts? So my view is the GOK, Government of Kenya, and the county governments owe it to the business community and those people that they owe to pay their debts so that this becomes sustainable. But if you continue giving handouts, how long can you give handouts?
You see,
Let me just persuade you, it's a different problem. The problem of unpaid bills in government, I agree with my colleague, should be tackled because it deflates part of the impact of fiscal policy. And that problem of unpaid bills is different from the problem of articulating cash payments to the needy in order to stabilize the economy and create macro stabilizers. There are different problems.
I think they are
although,
a bit intertwined.
although I agree with you entirely that unpaid bills are an issue that should be tackled.
But why do we have unpaid bills?
And they are all
We need to
intertwined.
question why we really have. Is the government not really having enough fund? Right? There's no enough cash flow. Why are we having unpaid bills for quite a long time? Because we're given to understand a lot, especially if you look at the
160 billion.
just a moment. If you look at the counties as well, we saw from Treasury they're actually crying foul that the monies that have been dispersed to the counties, they're taken back to Treasury. They are unused completely. Yet people down there, they are not actually receiving any services delivered, to the ground. So when we're talking about unpaid bills, why are we having these pending bills within counties as well? Because we are given to understand there's money stashed away to commercial banks.
Let me step in here, Debarl. One second, Dr. Let me step in here. I think, first of all, as Kenyans, we must accept that the reason for devolution was, in fact, to try and deal with the original question that Mike Eldon and Mureu were speaking to,
Yes.
that we need to have, centers of growth all across, in order that every Kenyan should be closer to center stage, or in fact a center stage of economic activity. Having said that, we need to put people in office who know what they're doing. So,
Exactly.
and we're heading into a general election. What Kenyans we need to do in every county is ensure that the people we put in leadership understand how to manage economies. Third, the county systems themselves, we must continue to build their capacity for them to execute their programs. What you refer to, Debarl, yes, for quite a number of years, and you've seen Treasury taking out advertisements saying, this is what we have disbursed to counties,
Yes.
and these are the balances in their accounts at the central bank. In fact, at one point, many economists feared that the counties could drive us to recession, because we are parking money there and they are not able to spend the money in the correct way, in a timely fashion. Why? Because it's not just a question of writing a check. The county has to follow the public finance management law in terms of having appropriate plans translated into annual budgets and spending against those annual budgets with approval of the county assemblies. That process for many counties proved much more difficult for them to internalize, to process, and that is why there were delays on their part. And I think we are headed into a general election. The whole point of elections, Debarl, is to allow the citizen to put in play appropriate and leadership that is able to implement.
Right, Mike Eldon.
In my experience with the counties, there are actually a surprising number of good people in a surprising number of counties trying so hard to do what they promised to do, what they were elected to do, to deliver better service and infrastructure and so forth. The challenge arises with competing demands for that money, for it to be well spent. And these competing demands are from the same citizens who want those better services, but who also want their candidates to be generous to them in other ways. And there's also the challenge of the MCAs with their own demands. So it's a juggling act for the county governments as to how to spend money legitimately whilst also uplifting procurement and doing all these other things that they feel they have to do to satisfy people who, in the absence of doing that, they wouldn't get re-elected. And that's at the county level. At the national level and at the county level, we know there is still so much bureaucracy, so much waste, so much mismanagement, so much lack of proper management of resources and allocation, lack of absorptive capacity. All these things together means that we are not using the money we have effectively, and there's too much indifference as to whether a supplier gets paid or not. That's the way it is. It's the normal. He gets paid, he doesn't get paid.
Still, how do you explain wheelbarrows at 100,000, Bob? So
it's very much part of what I'm saying.
How do you explain?
It's exactly what I'm saying.
How do you explain counties that are able to build, for example, road roads and deliver on them, in counties that have not built even an inch of any?
No, it's your point about competency.
Yeah. So I think that we accept running government is actually a fairly complicated affair.
No,
and I think we owe ourselves as Kenyans.
But is that the underlying factor? Is that the underlying factor? Because also even right now we have the Bank Amendment Bill 2016 that actually has been forwarded by Kimani Ichung'wah, because he is actually against, and this is targeted mostly to the governors, stashing away money with commercial banks. The warehousing funds with commercial banks to actually gain interest. So there is no development within the counties because governors want to stash away the money so they can actually get, from the billions, they can get the millions from there.
But isn't that what we are saying? Isn't that what we are saying? That Kenyans, for heaven's sake, stand up for yourself and elect people who really can perform
No,
and
no, no,
who
no.
know
But
what
even
they're
if we put other leaders that we still have maybe some loopholes in the system, we'll still go back there. Why can't we have a single treasury account, right? Instead of disbursing this money to counties, where they will just draw, where you monitor the money. You actually have been the acting chairman of Central Bank of Kenya. Why can't we have a single treasury account?
There is a very serious question, I think Muriithi is pointing to it, about housekeeping in public finances. You need top-notch capacities. I do not want to speak for departments in government like the Treasury. You really need to modernize and have under your arm top-notch capacity. Look at the paradox we've just spoken about regarding unpaid bills. We every year we have a parliament appropriate a certain amount of money to be spent. A very large amount of that money is returned to the especially the development vote is returned to the Treasury, and you still have unpaid bills. And you then move on to new appropriations in Parliament with increased taxes sometimes, and you are asking for more money when you are not able to meet the targets of the previous year and spend the money that was allocated to you by Parliament in the previous year. But even worse, there is the question that you mentioned of the single treasury account.
Yes.
Incredible discussions have continued on the issue. It is uncalled for and probably a question again of capacity, whether taxpayers' money should lie in commercial banks. If you have problems with paying bills, as my colleague is saying, it should be done from a single operational account of the government.
Yes.
Otherwise, when you allow commercial banks to keep funds, public funds, taxpayer funds in their balance sheets, I'm sure the banker here will confirm, a bank's business is merely to move items in liabilities to the asset side and trade with those assets, loan books, government treasury bills, etc., government bonds, and make its own income out of that. If we allow too much of public funding, public finances to remain in the commercial banks, in many senses, the government ends up borrowing its own money from commercial banks. It is much more sensible to hive away taxpayers' funds,
yes,
so that they are used in an operational account that meets the needs of paying government bills, ensures that commercial banks do the traditional business of raising deposits and deepening financial intermediation in the economy, but not to trade on government taxpayers' money.
Yeah, but this is what has been happening. The reality on the ground, they've been trading with the taxpayers' money on the ground to actually gain interest, right?
Yeah,
to actually also buy treasury bills. Right?
I think that, okay, we haven't quite succeeded fully in a single treasury account, but I think we should give credit to the effort to do so. You see, it is one thing to recognize a challenge or a problem.
Yes.
But I think the real crux of the matter is to be able to design a solution and to implement that solution. Now, whether we go back to the question of cash transfers and so on, you see that they are vulnerable in society, and you design a solution and you implement that solution. We know that we don't want public finances lying around in commercial banks, because after all, as government, we go to the market every week looking for liquidity. Why should we be picking up our own liquidity from our own resources? So, and what is the solution? Single treasury account or one operational account from which these things, and now technology is beginning to make this a more realistic possibility. And so the thing to do is to push that to proper and complete implementation. One other one, which is really democratizing, if I can use that terminology, government debt. This thing that why should we always borrow from the big insurance companies and the big banks? Why can't we allow Kenyans to lend government directly? Yeah, and this is what we would like to see now. And that allows government a lot of flexibility, so that government is not being cornered by the monopolistic, oligopolistic behavior of the large commercial banks. So, we'd like to see that solution get to the conclusion, which is that I should be able to go on my mobile phone, lend government 1,000 bob.
Thank you. And I think we'll delve deeper into that. Let's hear from James Mureu.
Quick one. You know, this conversation that is going on, personally, I see the government coming in to deal with symptoms rather than the real disease. The real disease is there is a big problem. That's why even businesses cannot sustain the employment. That's why they are having to dish out more money. So realistically, the government, and there is a thread that runs through the national government and the county governments of inadequacies, inability to manage resources. So personally, I think there is much more than what we are talking about here, because the symptom here is people don't have enough cash. They can't survive. They don't have a livelihood. But giving them that occasional handout is not the solution. The solution lies in dealing with the disease, and the disease here is the government is not the government debt has grown to an unsustainable amount,
yes,
and the businesses cannot sustain themselves. And the problem is going to get bigger and bigger as more and more businesses become illiquid. They are unable to sustain themselves, and the number that the government has to sustain, therefore, will grow bigger and bigger.
All right.
I think this time has come for us to rethink. But I also want to agree for once with my friend Nderitu that indeed the competence of these people who have been given this responsibility is questionable. A lot of them are sitting, they have never handled these billions. So to them, these numbers don't add up in their heads. I'm sorry to say this. And then we have a bloated government that is also sustainable. So maybe when we go back to the new
let's say from Mike Eldon, you're a proponent of ethical leadership, and of course you also have been training these governors, and of course the deputy governors and the entire maybe county assembly. What are you learning from the ground? Is it a problem of ethical leadership that we are having, that we have a scarcity mentality? As it speaks, many they've never handled billions before. So is it a matter of scarcity mentality that we have? So you want to come in and also grab a lot because you know very sure that yes, come 2017, you'll be back in this office.
Well, there are multiple questions there. Right? You know, my first thought as I was listening to some of this, and particularly about people never having had to deal with these sorts of complex issues of this scale, is our friend Mr. Trump, right? Who thinks everything is simple and everything is just another business deal, and is finding out it's not the case. And probably it's the same with many people who've come to government. But at the same time, we have a lot of very experienced people in our county governments. And if not the governors, then the deputy governors. The challenge often is the relation between the two. And when that is poor, which it often is, it creates all sorts of other challenges. And when you have conflict and competition in terms of a scarcity for power, and hence the prospects for the next election, you're distracted from managing the resources that you have. But I have been pleasantly surprised by the quality and seriousness of purpose of many of the county government people I've come into contact with, and also people in ministries and other agencies. We do a lot of work with the Kenya School of Government, and they have this program, the Strategic Leadership Development Program, that upper middle level civil servants have to go through in order to get promoted further. The vitality and the quality and the interest and the engagement among these people is uniformly high. When you talk to them and you ask them how it's doing and what impact they'll be able to make when they go back to their offices, a very common complaint is, of course, about their bosses. That their bosses are distracted with all sorts of other priorities. It's not a lack of competence, it's a mixture of priorities, including ethical challenges.
Ethical challenges.
But our whole system of politics here is such that unless you agree to become ethically challenged, you will probably not be able to generate the funds you need to get elected.
Thank you.
And it is that same voter who wants you to do all those things that make it cost a lot of money.
Thank you. Just